Now available in paperback and coming to Kindle Unlimited. John Haynes, Dark Succubus. The man who rules the world is tempted by a sultry succubus in this all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get John Haynes, Dark Succubus in paperback or pre-order on Kindle Unlimited today. The daughter of Rudy Ray Moore, the man who played Dolomite in the 1970s, claims that Eddie Murphy and Netflix are getting rich at her expense while she is on welfare. And when I take a critical examination of this issue as someone who has been in the entertainment business for over 20 years, it seems like some of the details here are quite sketchy on his daughter's side of the story. Because in order for a production company to make any sort of film, they have to secure the rights to that intellectual property beforehand. Now, Dolomite, Rudy Ray Moore's daughter, says that she, when her father died in 2008, she was given the rights over that estate. And when I look at that, it's quite questionable, because if you were given the rights to her father's intellectual property, that would have been documented not only in a will, but it would have also been documented and filed within a probate court, and those documents would have been transferred over to her. Now, Rudy Ray Moore's daughter says that she had signed some documents and dealt with some issues and then didn't know what happened to those rights. But anybody who knows the entertainment business knows that you need to have some sort of entertainment lawyer on retainer as related to the estate of a deceased entertainer. And the reason why you need to have an entertainment lawyer on hand, on retainer, is so that they can look over the documents as related to the estate and ensure that the rights are transferred to the appropriate parties. And if Rudy Ray Moore's daughter was the executor of the estate, I would think she would have gone out of her way to contact that entertainment lawyer at the time of her father's passing over 10 years ago, and making sure that his rights were secured and given to the right individuals, because that's what an executor is supposed to do. They are supposed to manage the deceased estate, and they're supposed to ensure that the properties go to the individuals that the deceased has bequeathed to them. Now, in this case, I'm looking at it and I'm not seeing any sort of good understanding of business or a good understanding of the law as related to Rudy Ray Moore's daughter. And she's making claims that Netflix and Eddie Murphy took advantage of her. However, this matter should have been taken care of over a decade ago when Mr. Moore passed away, because that was the time for the executor to make sure that all of her father's intellectual properties were secured, and make sure that everything that he created and the rights to his intellectual property were in her name. And it should have probably been done even before that, ensuring that the transfer of his intellectual property remained in the hands of his estate. And as an executor, that would be her job. And I would think, again, that would be something she would have done 10 years ago. And on the side as related to Eddie Murphy and Netflix, again, you would think this entertainer, Eddie Murphy, who has done numerous films, and if he wanted to do this film, he would have sent out his entertainment lawyers to find out who owned the rights to the intellectual property as related to Rudy Ray Moore's estate, and he would have made sure to compensate those individuals who controlled the estate. But Rudy Ray Moore's daughter, again, said that she had signed some documents, and this is where things get cloudy, because if she signed documents and signed those rights away, then that would have led to her not getting any sort of compensation, because this is why it is very important for people to not only read what they sign, but also have those documents looked over by an entertainment lawyer who can advise you of what you should or should not sign those documents. And it looks like here Rudy Ray Moore's daughter really didn't know much about entertainment law, didn't know much about licensing, and didn't know much about business, because to make this claim all the way in August when the trailer of this film it was released, it's quite questionable, because if Eddie Murphy and Netflix were to have been to greenlight this film, they would have greenlit this film over a year and a half ago. And again, before they greenlit the film, they would have asked the tough, critical question: what are the rights to Rudy Ray Moore's estate secure? And do we have the permissions to make this film? So in order to make any sort of film, you have to secure the rights to the property, and you have to gain permission from the rights owners. And that's something that has to be done early on. And again, her making this claim here in 2019, back in August, is questionable, because she would have made that claim way back years ago, and she would have secured those rights over 10 years ago at Mr. Moore's passing, not just with a will, but she would have contacted his lawyers and made sure that those rights were transferred to her. So that's where I'm having some issues here, because she's saying that they're getting richer while she was on welfare. But when I look at Rudy Ray Moore's estate, there's no way that this woman would have wound up on welfare, because Mr. Moore controlled almost all of his intellectual property, I thought. And I thought he had all of the rights to his intellectual property. And as a smart businessman, I thought he would have secured all of those rights and made sure those rights would remain in the hands of his family. That's what I thought he would have done with these rights. And I thought even if he was in poor health at the time, he would have still made sure to make sure all of this stuff was taken care of beforehand. So when I'm looking at this case as someone who has been in the entertainment business, has studied the entertainment business, I don't see how this project could have gotten greenlit without securing those rights, without contacting her, because as an executor of the estate who was supposed to have been left everything as related to his estate, the only way they wouldn't have contacted her is if she had signed a bad contract with someone else and led to the transfer of those rights. And that happens a lot in the entertainment industry, especially when people are not educated on the entertainment business or educated on the securing of property rights. As someone who is a publisher, I understand that you have, in order for me to, if I was to take any sort of book project from somebody outside, I would have to have them sign a contract transferring the rights to me, giving me permission to print this or print an adaptation of it. So I would need to secure rights, and I would have to have those contracts on record to say, I have a license to produce this, I have permission to produce this by the owner, and I have purchased those rights, and I have to have all of that documented. And if I were to go out here and say, take one of my properties, like a John Haynes or an ISIS, and a production company were to come to me, they would have to go and contact me. They would have to deal with my terms, and then we would have to agree to some sort of licensing deal or some sort of purchase as related to intellectual property rights for film or television. And again, these rights would have to be secured before you even took this project and got any sort of green light for it. So when I look at his daughter's claim that she was being taken advantage of, it seems like it wasn't Eddie Murphy or Netflix that took advantage of her. It seems like somebody 10 years ago tried to find a way to sneak these rights away from her, and sadly, because she was in an emotional state, she didn't really take a critical look at these documents and see what she was signing or see what she was signing away. So the person she has an issue with, I believe, isn't Netflix and Eddie Murphy, because if they were able to get these rights beforehand, then she has an issue with whoever swindled her. And it's sad that she has gotten swindled, because this is the second legacy that I've seen literally fall apart, because with John H. Johnson's passing, we saw his entire legacy fall apart because his daughter did not have a good understanding of business. And sadly, it looks like Rudy Ray Moore's daughter didn't have a good understanding of business. And this is what led to her not being able to benefit from her father's estate, and her winding up on welfare while Netflix and Eddie Murphy are allegedly getting rich at her expense. Because again, all of this should have been settled over a decade ago in your probate court, and as related to the rights and properties, all of that should have been settled as the will was filed in probate court, and all of this should have been taken care of back then. And to make the claim now is quite troubling, because it shows that his daughter really didn't understand how the entertainment business worked, because if she understood how the business worked, she would have secured all of the rights to his intellectual property before his passing, and held on to those rights, because those rights are wealth building assets, and those wealth building assets have value over time. And that's something people need to understand when you own intellectual property, is it may not have a value today, but long term it may have a value in the future. And this is why you have to go out of your way to secure those rights, protect those rights, and protect things like your intellectual property rights, like your copyrights, your trademarks, your master files. All of that stuff needs to be secured by an individual early on, because if you don't have control over those wealth building assets, eventually you're going to wind up sadly in poverty, like Rudy Ray Moore's daughter. If you'd like to pick up some of my SJS Direct publications, like the ICE series, the E-Steam series, The Temptation of John Haynes, the John Haynes series, and the Spinsterella trilogy, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com in the description box. And if you want to help me make more videos like this, you can donate to my PayPal, my Patreon, or my Cash Apps by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Spinsterella. Discover the dark side of love in this goth and lovely romance with Spinsterella. Get Spinsterella in paperback and e-readers at your favorite online bookseller today.